that while I'm thinking of it. There we go. Are there any questions before we begin? Everybody comfortable in the Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
All righty. I'm just going to open up in prayer, and then we will begin this afternoon. Father God, we come and we are thankful for this opportunity to gather and to discuss your work in our kingdom, in our communities. Father, we just would ask that you would open our ears and our hearts to what you would have us hear, and we invite the Holy Spirit now to come and just speak to us, whisper to us in these moments. We pray for Buita as she brings this time and her learning and her skills to sharpen us. And Father, we would ask that you would anoint her for this time. We ask all these things in your precious Son's name, Jesus' name. Amen. And so without further ado, I'm going to mute, and then we will have our time together. So, muting.
All right.
And
all right.
There.
Everybody hearing me? Oh, I'm getting some feedback for myself, so I think I will just go with it. Thank you for having me here today. It's we had a great chance to have a good conversation this morning, and I'm happy to do it again this afternoon with those of you who have been working in community and social services in the community and family services departments and that are involved in CORES. You do such wonderful, phenomenal work, and I'm happy to help kind of provide some thoughts and insights that might give you some things to think about and to push you a little further. So a little bit about myself. I think we'll have some time for introductions of you as well, but just a bit of information to let you know who I am. I'm Professor Buita Warkentin. I've been at Booth University College for 12 years now. Feels like a long time. And I have taught their social work practice with communities course for a number of years. In terms of my own interest in community work, I come from a background in theology. I got an undergraduate degree in theology, and that kind of spurred me on to figuring out whether I wanted to be a pastor or whether I wanted to be a social worker. And out of that, I actually went to Wilfrid Laurier University and Waterloo Lutheran Seminary and did a joint master's degrees in social work and theological studies. And so for me, the significance of the work that I do is that ability to bring together the faith with the practice. And so the branch of social work that most interests me is that sense of affecting change on a community level. So not just working one-on-one with people, but that ability to kind of take those individuals that come in the door and kind of find out what are those commonalities and how do we address those commonalities to make change for many people. I attend a congregation here in Winnipeg that is in the core area and is involved in reaching out with those in our neighborhood and trying to make a difference in being Christ to those around us. And so that's an important piece for me as well. I want to take some time to hear from you folks. But before I do that, I think my next slide just covers off a little bit of the information in terms of the sessions that you're going to be doing over the next, I guess it's 4 months. I think I'm doing this month and the next month. And then, so we're going to today talk about engaging with community. How do we kind of build relationships within communities to bring about a better world? Next time we'll get a little bit more practical, perhaps, in terms of thinking about assets and connections, connecting organizations and people together to work together to create a vibrant community. And that's where that book, and Peter will share with us about that later. I know that there was a bit of a mix-up on the book, but we've got Community Conversations, I think is the title of the book that Paul Bourne sent to us. And so I'm going to use that in the next session, as well as some work on asset-based community development. So that'll be a good practical session. The third session is going to be on integrated mission, the 4 foundations, and that's with Lieutenant Colonel David Bowles. And then the fourth week, the final one, is on community mapping with Colonel Debbie Graves. So we've got a great series here for you, and I'm really enjoyed the conversation this morning already, and I know that we're going to get a great group together to do some good learning together today as well. So introductions. And this is where I'm going to get Peter to unmute us. I've told you a little bit about myself and what brings me to this work. But I'd love to hear from the rest of you in terms of what's your passion for community work. I think maybe we heard Starbucks in the background there. But just share what your name is, the core or community and family services program you're with, and what's your passion for community work. Okay, somebody feel free to jump in.
Well, my name is Sherry Fingstad, and I work for the Nipawin and Tisdale Salvation Army, which is a circuit, except for Nipawin's branching off, and we're going to be on our own pretty soon here. My passion for community and family services work is I'm the Community and Family Services Director, and I've been working for the Salvation Army for close to 10 years now. And I just really have a passion for helping people in the community. And I just really feel that everyone needs connection. And I think that's one of the biggest things with people who are experiencing poverty. They don't have a lot of connection. And I just like to connect and work with other groups to help make some positive things for people.
That's great. Who else do we have?
My name is Renee McFadden, and I'm first-year officer in Langley, BC at the Willows Community Church. And we have a Gateway of Hope in another ministry unit here in Langley as well. But we don't have our own branch, I guess, of community and family services. And so I'm really keen to figure out what that could look like in our organization. Not only partnering with the Gateway, but also expanding the services in our community.
Great.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Sorry, my name's Bee. I'm with the Salvation Army in Maple Ridge.
Great.
And sorry about my volume problems there. I can finally hear you. That was a human error. That was my error. Yeah, so I actually just started this position, Community and Family Ministries Advocate, on Monday.
Wow.
Yeah, so
welcome aboard.
Thank you. I was with the Salvation Army for about 5 years. 2013 I left, and I'm now back, but just in a different position. So very excited.
Wonderful. All right, I think we have a few more people. Some might be on chat though. Oh, Peter, I can't hear you now.
I muted myself, sorry.
Oh, there we go.
King of the mute button. Tatiana says that she works at Fort St. John Ministry Unit. We've only been here since November, so she's trying to figure out how to partner with community and bring the best service to the people within the community.
Great. Okay. Anybody else to introduce themselves?
We have Madison working in Edmonton at the Edmonton Temple that opened up family services, which we're calling community ministries, just last April. I spent some time living in an intentional community in Vancouver for a while, which really opened my eyes to poverty and the strength in community. So I think that's where my passion comes from, actually living it and now trying to bring that same sense of community elsewhere.
Well, that's great. Is that all of us then?
No, I'm Val Wicks. I'm from Haven of Hope Ministries in Regina. We are a community ministries as well. We were a family services program, changed it probably about 5 years ago to community ministries. Been doing this for 14 years. I could not imagine being anywhere else. Lots of interesting people come in. The thing that is my passion is we've been able to create a safe place. In fact, I had a gentleman this morning needs to have an appointment. He picked our office to have this appointment with another agency because he knew it was safe. So that's what we're about.
That's wonderful. That idea of safety came out this morning as well. And that's really great. Yeah. I am looking forward to learning from you guys as well. We're going to have lots of time for conversations to hear about the kinds of things that you're doing. And hopefully some of the thoughts that I can bring to the table will kind of coalesce for you and kind of strike a chord in terms of the things that you're already doing and the things that you can think about maybe doing differently or moving forward on. Okay, Peter, we're okay to kind of keep going now? We've got everybody? Perfect. Okay. So this session, so what I want to do today then is spend a little bit of time and we're going to learn from you guys in terms of how you define community. You guys have tons of experience, and so it's going to be great to learn from that. And I'm going to just do a little brief introduction into a bit of the history of community development, where it comes from, and then we're really going to dig into Paul Bourne's book on deepening community, and we're going to talk about engagement and 4 different ways that we can kind of dig in to move from that shallow community that he talks about at the beginning to moving towards a deeper, richer community that has that sense of safety, that sense of connectedness, that sense of belonging, and that sense of ability to kind of work together to meet goals. Okay. So to start with, I want to do a bit of a definition of community. And so for this, I want you to jot down 1 or 2 ideas of how you would define community. So think about it in terms of the core that you're working in, or the community ministries, or community and family services program that you're with. And think about it as well in terms of the intentional communities that you've been a part of. How would you define community? What are those 1 or 2 ideas that you think are kind of core to what community is? And then we're going to get Peter to unmute us, and we can share those ideas with the larger group. So if you have an idea or 2, feel free to kind of shout it out.
And the mics are open.
I would say for me, a big part of community is the people that make up that community.
Yeah, in what way? Do you want to say a little more about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of times when people think about communities, they think of the area, where it's located. But for me, I mean, the community is the people that make up that area. And
yeah. So it's more about the people than the geography for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sure. How about others?
Tatjana's sharing, it's a sense of belonging, support, participation.
Absolutely.
I like that concept of participation too. That sense that if you're a part of a community, there's that sense of belonging there, but that also means that you're participating, right? That you're not just you're not just along for the ride. How about other ideas?
Mutuality.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Sure, mutuality.
Mutuality, yeah. And tell me what you mean by that.
Everyone has something to contribute and learn from everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to feel like you have something to offer, right? That it's not just always being on the receiving end, but that you have something to give as well.
Madison's offering a group of people from different backgrounds and situations working together and sharing what we have. And then she brackets that with can be physical things as well as personality traits.
Yeah, that sense of we've each got our sense of personality, our own identity, and that sense that we have something to offer to the community, that our gifts, our talents, who we are is a part of that. Any other last ideas?
I think community is a safe place where you all support one another and are there for one another and hold each other up.
Yeah. And you guys are really getting on the key pieces that we're going to talk about today in terms of community. So you already know this at some level intuitively, and you're living this out. And we're going to hear a little bit more about what some of the writers on community have to say. So I'm going to move us forward here to the next slide, I think. There we go. So definition of the community. So Holman is a textbook that I use in my communities class. And when he talks about community, he talks about a number of people with something in common that connects them in some way and distinguishes them from others. So it's that sense of what is it that you have in common together, but also what makes you different from another group. And so this might be an activity or an interest group. And so, you know, an example of that would be the women's group that I'm a part of. We're meeting together next Thursday. We call ourselves middle women because we didn't like the name middle-aged, but middle women seemed appropriate. And so what we have in common is that we are all, you know, somewhat middle-aged. And that kind of distinguishes us as well from other women who might be, my daughter is a young adult, and so she's not middle women yet. So what is it that connects you, and what is it that distinguishes you? So an activity or an interest group. We talked about geographic location as well, so we can think about the neighborhoods that we live in. As a geographic community. And then also things like religion or ethnic identity or things like that that draw us together. Peter has said that he's starting a Facebook group for our community here. And so that's in some ways another interest group as well, something that connects us together. The Born book. So this is from the textbook that you guys were, you were given some PDF copies of it. And so this quote, I think, is not from the pages that you have, but it's a little bit further along in the book. And I'd encourage you, if you have a chance to pick up a copy of the book, it really is well worth it. So Born talks about community, not just in that, you know, Holman kind of has a cut and dried approach to community, it sometimes seems like, but Born really gets at that feeling of community in terms of belonging. So an experience of belonging in community as being with others over time, prompting mutual acts of caring, and the merging of individual identities with the group identity. So that sense that you're a part of something, that it's not just a one-shot deal, and that takes time, and that with time and with growth, with connectedness to each other, we learn to care about each other, and we learn to kind of associate ourselves with that group identity. And so who we are as an individual becomes merged with that group identity. Okay. I want to frame this a little bit in terms of some of the context of the history of community development. So community development comes out of something called the settlement house movement, which happened in the mid to late 1800s. And it started in England. And if you look at the dates on that, you'll kind of recognize that this is around the time that William Booth is beginning the Salvation Army and his work in terms of social justice and meeting need. So the settlement house movement arose around the Industrial Revolution, in the time when people were coming from the country and moving to the cities. There was rampant poverty, lots of social issues happening. And settlement houses were about helping newcomers to adjust to the city. When the settlement house movement came across the water and it came to the United States and it came to Canada, it became about helping newcomers to adjust to this new country as well, and kind of figuring out how to maintain what they wanted to of the past, of their own ethnic culture, where they come from, and also making those adjustments to the new country that they're in. The thing that the settlement house movement did was that it moved beyond blaming individuals for their problems. So personal problems became less about moral failings and were more related to the social conditions that are around them. So they began to see and understand that the person who's struggling with addictions, that it's not just about that choice of whether to drink or not to drink, that there's other pieces at play in terms of what's causing them to be in that position. So they became about addressing those social inequities that lead to these other personal problems. So the work that they did then was about connecting people together so that together they could deal with the issues that were affecting those in the neighborhood. And some of the things that they were able to do was to affect change around adult education. They created daycares and kindergartens. They created libraries, recreational opportunities. So this is kind of the early beginnings of things like the Young Men's Christian Association, the YMCA, that kind of stuff, all comes out of the settlement house movement things. So they also became about advocacy and political activism. So addressing those real injustices that are there in terms of living conditions, lots of slum housing that they were working to kind of make sure that landlords were fair to the people that were living there. Advocacy and political activism around education, around jobs, fair working conditions, sanitation, clean water, all those kinds of things. So when we think about community development, then it's about connecting people with each other, but it's also about addressing some of those bigger picture challenges and problems. So when we think about Booth and the work that Booth did and the work that the Salvation Army continues to do, we know that addressing injustice is a huge piece of it, whether it's in terms of addictions, poverty, homelessness. We know that the programs that were created include shelters for men, programs for women leaving the sex trade, programs for children. We've got work programs, addictions programs, corrections, newcomers, health, disabilities, thrift stores, and the list kind of goes on in terms of the work that's being done in the name of the Salvation Army to improve the lives of the people living here. When we think about how that gets done, then we think about those integrated mission pieces. And this is what you'll be learning, and you'll be talking more about this in one of the coming sessions. But those guiding principles then in terms of as the Salvation Army enters in to live out their mission to address injustice, they're looking at it from that aspect of care, taking care of those around us. Community, that attention to that need for belonging and that need for connectedness that we all have. And out of that care and that community connectedness is that impetus for change, that sense that we can make a difference in the world around us. And that together, underlying all of that, is hope that we can together bring about God's justice. So all of the work that Salvation Army programs do involves connecting with and serving individuals. And when we think about community social work then, or community work, is addressing the challenges of this particular population within the context of community. So how does the community as a whole respond to the context or to the people who live in that context? So not just working with the individual, but working with many individuals to address that need. I'm going to do one more slide and then I think we'll stop for some questions. So we're shifting then, and my social work students often have a challenge with this. They come into the work because they want to make a difference for individuals. They want to make a difference for the person that's sitting right in front of them. And sometimes I tell them the story of the person who's sitting beside the river and all of a sudden a body comes floating down. And so of course, you pull the body out of the river and you do what you can for that person. But then another body comes floating down the river and another. And at some point somebody needs to go up the river to see what's going on and make changes and address things at the head of the river, in addition to meeting the needs of the individuals that are there. So we want to see, working with the community as a client, that we're not just working with the individuals, but we're working with, we're going upstream to address the issues for the whole community. So if the community is a client, we see that client system as having needs and resources of its own. It's an entity to itself that has resources that can help to strengthen it and needs that it has challenges meeting at times. So the community then is able to take action and promote well-being for itself. So community problems then are situations when the community's needs are not met and community discomfort results. So these are conditions that block human and community development, and we can see these as an invitation to change or to take action to go from where we are to where we want to be. So community change then is about eliminating or reducing the problems, doing something differently to take ourselves as a community to a place that's better. So community change through community development then is about recognizing our assets and discovering how to use them more productively. And we're going to make that change in the larger system. When we identify our assets, then we're able to reduce or eliminate problems. We can provide improvement in the way that needs are met, and we can develop assets for the benefits of members, so that those assets that we identify then becomes things that we can use to reduce and eliminate the problems that are there. We're also about enhancing the quality of life of individual members by working for the community as a whole. We want to make the lives of those individuals better. And enhancing the quality of relationships between members as well, so that it's about when we identify the assets that members have, when we get them connected to use those assets for the benefit of each other, building relationships between each other, then we can kind of make the world a better place. Okay, I'm going to stop for now, and we're going to head into the born pieces in a minute, but I just want to check and see whether there's any questions yet. We're all good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Everyone's unmuted.
All right. Any questions? We're doing okay?
Not yet.
All right. Good stuff. Okay. Then I'm going to take us into the born stuff, and then we'll have some more opportunity for sharing a little bit more of our own stories yet. So, Paul Bourne, who did the book Deepening Community, and here's a picture of it here. So Bourne is a real storyteller, and his book is a collection of wisdom, I think, from the interviews, the many interviews that he's had with people about what community means to them. And so this is some of the wisdom that he's gleaned from that. So he's identified 5 principles of community. The first one that he's come up with is that seeking community is natural. So we as human beings naturally gravitate towards making connections with each other. And that sense of seeking relationship is sometimes about safety, that we're safer when we're together. It's sometimes about comfort, but it really is about that sense of belonging. And you guys identified that already, that belongingness is important. He also talks about the fact that we all have many communities in our lives. So we each have multiple communities that we are a part of. Sometimes they go together well. Sometimes there's, some bumps and challenges in terms of the way one community sees things being different than the way another community sees things. And so sometimes there's challenges with that. But we've talked about communities in terms of location, in terms of interest groups, in terms of faith or ethnicity, those kinds of things. We can choose to deepen our experience with community. So in the beginning of his book, and I think this was part of your reading, he was talking about shallow communities, fear-based communities, and deep communities. And I think in Canada, we're not as bound by fear-based communities perhaps as the States are, although I think it probably depends a little bit on where you're from and what your community is. I think there are pockets of us, I think, that kind of fall into that us versus them piece that fear kind of brings out. But I think that many of us are part of those shallow communities where you know people, but you don't know people really well. And he would say that we can choose to deepen our community experience. And I think that that's a piece of what we're looking at the cores that you work in and the community programs that you're with as an opportunity to help people that we are working with to deepen their sense of connection and their sense of community. He would say as well that seeking community is part of our spiritual journey. We know that over the years, religion has kind of been decreasing. People's connectedness and engagedness with attending church, identifying themselves as being part of a religion, we're seeing a downward trend with that. But while we're seeing a downward trend in terms of the number of people who identify religiously, we are also seeing an upswing in terms of the number of people who would identify themselves as seeking something spiritual. So we know that people are seeking and are reaching out for something bigger than themselves. And community is a part of that spiritual journey. It's part of our search for meaning and identity as we reach out towards each other to kind of figure out together what this all means. The last thing that he talks about is that healthy community leads to individual and collective altruism. That through relationship, through a connectedness to each other, engagement with each other, that when we have those pieces, we're more willing to work together towards the good of our community, even if it costs us something. And that's what altruism is about, that sense that even if it costs me, the greater good is important, and that we want to be a part of that. And as we have that sense of individual and collective altruism, when we act upon that, we have a greater sense of belonging to each other. It increases our sense of belonging to the community. Okay. So community then, as Bourne describes it, is centered on that willingness to build meaningful relationships. When we have meaningful relationships with others, we have people we can rely on and that we can turn to in times of stress and in times of celebration. I often talk to my social work students about the fact that as a social worker, you really want to work yourself out of a job. You want people to get to the point where they have coping mechanisms within themselves and within the people around them. They've got that connectedness. They've got those people to rely on, that they don't have the need in the same way to turn to a professional. That said, there are always going to be times when you need a social worker or when you need a professional. But the more that we can get people turning to each other, that's an important thing that we can do. So I think then when I think about your role as a church and as a community organization, it's important to think about the role that you play as a catalyst in helping those in your neighborhood to connect to each other, to deepen their connection to community through building those relationships, so that it becomes less about doing for, less about kind of making sure that you provide the correct services for these people in need, and more about helping these people in need to come together and explore themselves, what strengths they have, what abilities and gifts that they bring to the table, that they can offer to each other to help meet each other's needs. Okay. So Bourne talks about a few ways of doing this. So he identifies 4 acts to deepen community. So rather than staying on that shallow level, if we think about how we want to move to deepen that community, he talks about creating opportunities to share our stories. He talks about enjoying one another, caring for one another, and out of all of this comes that ability to work together to build a better world. So today I want to kind of just focus in on each of these a little bit and then hear your stories about how you are doing each of these things in the setting that you're in. Okay, so Bourne's book is all about stories. And this is some of the wisdom that he's gleaned about community through listening to people's stories. And when we share our stories with each other, we open ourselves to each other and we become vulnerable, and that helps to build trust. So the wisdom that he gleaned is that community and belonging help to shape our identity. That our sense of self is broadened when we have others who can reflect back how they see us. I think sometimes we get ourselves stuck in this place where we only see ourselves in a negative light. And when we have others that we can connect to, that helps us to see and understand that, that there's a different way to see ourselves, that others see us differently. Community builds on the core conditions for mutual aid and prosperity. That sense that we can do more together than we can alone, that we have people to rely on in times of need and to celebrate with us in times of success. So that mutual aid, that sense of caring for each other, that ability to help each other out when we need it, and that sense of prosperity, that together we do better, and together we can build a good and strong place. He also talks about the fact that we can be smarter and more effective in community. I know that comes to play when I think of all the stuff that I myself don't know. If I wanted to run a program in something, I would need to get lots of help to be able to do that in an effective way. And so there's something to lean on in terms of collective wisdom. We can learn together collectively and act together on what we know. And next time we'll talk a little bit more about this sense of assets and the sense of understanding all the gifts that the community brings. And so what I might not know in terms of plumbing, I might have a neighbor that could do a really great job with that. And together we can get a new toilet put into the community center or whatever it is. But together we can do more. The other piece that he talks about is the fact that community improves our overall health and well-being. And he touches on a number of different studies in terms of health that talk about the fact that there are better outcomes for people who have more friends, more connections, more family, more people who they can turn to in a time of need, that there is just better overall health outcomes in that case and in that situation. Firsthand example, I have a sister-in-law who's just had knee replacement surgery, and she has had plenty of people who have been able to help with taking her to appointments, to bring meals, all of those kinds of things that when you think of some of the clients that we work with or some of the people in our communities that don't have people who can come and give them a hand as needed, somebody to clean their house, somebody to do childcare, all of those kinds of things. So community is something that helps us to do better in our world. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second here, and I'm going to let Peter unmute us all. And I would love to hear from you. What kinds of things are you doing that allow people to share their stories with each other? What kind of things are you doing that can help people with those connections in terms of learning more about each other?
Well, I think in Nipawin we have a coffee area that's open all of the time in our thrift store. Our family services, thrift store, everything are all in one building. And so we have a coffee area, and we have regulars that come in all of the time. You know, you get quite close to them. They tell you, you know, their stories, what's going on in their lives, and then they wind up helping out in the store and things like that. So it's really, you know, a really community. You know, they tell you when something exciting is going on in their lives, or they'll want to come and chat with you privately if something, you know, bad is going on in their lives. So I think it's just a really safe place for them to come.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and they really seem to enjoy it.
Other thoughts?
In Regina, we do a Thursday community lunch, and everybody sits at round tables, and we try and encourage them to sit with people they don't know, as well as people they do know.
Yeah.
And the lunch is served to them on dishes, not styrofoam, nothing disposable. And it's become like a family. Well, it's like their church. We do devotions, we do announcements, we ask about stuff that's going on in the community. And it's interesting to see how it's changed from when we first started. They now have ownership in the program. You can tell when new people come, because we no longer, I'm going to use the word police, even though that's wrong. We don't police the program anymore. It's, no, just come sit down, they'll bring your lunch to you. No, you don't have to clear your dishes. No, we're not going to take our cups outside. And it's become very much a community lunch.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that sense of ownership of it sounds great, that it's not you doing this for them, it's them owning it themselves.
Yeah.
And that's great. Yeah. And, you know, a couple other pieces too is that sense of round tables. You know, there's sometimes little things that we do that can really facilitate community, and round tables and food are two things that really do help to facilitate that. Yeah.
One of those things, you feed them and they'll come.
Yeah, that's great. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, I'm going to move us on to the next slide. Okay. So our next piece then that Born talks about is the fact that we need to enjoy one another. And his story from here comes from, I think, lessons that he's learned through participation in the Mennonite Relief Sale fundraiser in New Hamburg every year, which is an enormous community venture, community effort that serves to raise funds for the Mennonite Central Committee relief work. And I think that, you know, a similar example of that would be the work that it takes to coordinate all of the Christmas kettles that the Salvation Army does, and all of the other wonderful things that the Salvation Army does. But kind of through this sense of working together comes his understanding of joy, the joy in working together, that importance of enjoying one another. And so through observing and participating in this big New Hamburg relief sale, he identified the joy of being together as one of those pieces that comes out of it. So through working together towards a goal, there was a sense of joy in the relationship with each other. He saw people having fun together, just really enjoying being with one another. And having been to the relief sale, I do know that there is that sense of joy of seeing all these people that you haven't seen in a long time. And yeah, it's a great thing. There's a joy of collective accomplishment as well. That collective energy that draws out the best in each other, the sense that we're all in it together, that we're all working together for something significant, which leads us to that joy of collective altruism. That shared sense of purpose and commitment to a goal that's greater than ourselves. He talks about working together for someone else's betterment, and that strengthens our commitment to each other and to the cause. And out of all of that comes this joy of the collective lightness of being, that sense that working together, that together the work is lighter, and the results of more meaningfulness. There's more meaning when we work together with a purpose. But enjoying each other doesn't necessarily need to come from working together. I think that's working together brings enjoyment, and I think that that's fantastic, but it doesn't always need to be about work. It's important for us to also play together, for us to just have fun being in each other's company. So whether that's the context of coming through opportunities to enjoy things we have in common, like music, maybe cooking, having some of the newcomers in your area come in and teach us how to cook a particular meal that's from their ethnic background. That can be a lot of fun. Books, sports, recreation, there's all kinds of things that we can do together to enjoy one another's company. So I'm going to pause it for a second here again, and I want to hear from you and learn from you. What are the things that you are doing in your programs to facilitate enjoyment? Any thoughts? Or is nobody having fun at the places where you are?
For me, there's been a lot of change within our Salvation Army. So prior to me starting, we had the shelter, we had our transitional housing upstairs, we had community meals, 3 meals a day. And now it's actually changed. We actually just this week, I started on last Monday, and Thursday, Friday, the admin, we've moved offices. So we're no longer in where the shelter is.
Okay.
So our program, my community and family ministries, is in a different office than where the shelter is. And one of the programs that we run is called Sonia's Cradle, and that's for moms and kids. So basically there's just a lot of change happening right now. So I'm trying to figure out how that's all going to be, but
yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah, change is sometimes hard, but yeah, to think about the ways that you can, as you change, find ways of bringing joy to it too. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. How about other thoughts?
In our congregation, we're having a family brunch Sunday next week, so we won't. We're in a shared space. We rent a school gym, so we'll be sitting around tables and having the meal together, and then participating in worship and devotions. But having some conversation starters and some activities. The kids all stay in with us for this. A little toddler corner where they can have some quiet toys and whatnot. But it's a way that we can share together and enjoy. In the fall, we also had a baseball game following one of these.
That's great. The church that I'm a part of had a chili cook-off a few weeks ago, and we had, I think there were like 5 different people. One was a young adult group that my daughter was actually a part of, and then 4 other people who brought in different kinds of chili, and we got to taste them, and we had to choose which was the winner. And that was just a good night of good fun. Not for any purpose. It wasn't fundraising for anything. It was just a night to have fun together. And that certainly kind of was an opportunity to build up connections between people that you see in church, but you don't necessarily chat with all the time. Any other thoughts on things that you do to enjoy each other?
Well, our church we have on Monday nights instead of Sunday, and we always have a meal every Monday night with it. So I think people always come and enjoy eating together, and the round it's on round tables too. We have all round tables set up so you can visit together a little bit more, and food always seems to bring people together and bring enjoyment.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Okay, I'm going to move us forward one more slide. So the next thing that Bourne talks about is caring for one another. And he talks about the importance of proximity in terms of knowing those that are around us, and that that's something that's important to us. We're more inclined to connect with those that we see regularly, those that are close by, and knowing those around us is important. you know, like a personal example of this for me is kind of thinking back to the days when I lived in an apartment and I knew absolutely nobody that lived in the apartments around me, nobody on any of the other floors. And I think we can all kind of relate to that a little bit. That's, speaking to that shallow community kind of thing. When we moved to Winnipeg, we bought a house that, and the house that's next door to me, our back doors open onto each other, and we have a fence that is just 4 feet high. So it's tall enough to keep my dog out, but short enough that I can actually see over the top and have conversations with my neighbors. Next door to me. The previous neighbors that were there were an elderly couple, and we actually ended up getting quite involved in their care. They weren't people who had family that lived around. They didn't have a strong sense of connection, other people in their lives that were able to care for them. And so myself and my husband, as well as the neighbors on across the back lane, we became more involved in kind of making sure that their needs were taken care of. But we can't take care of people unless we know them, right? We can't unless we see them. Bourne talks about the fact that the key to making the world a better place is taking chicken soup to your neighbor. And he notes a number of different assumptions that go along with that. So one of the assumptions is that you can't take chicken soup to your neighbor unless you know that you know them well enough to know that they're sick. So if you don't know them well enough to know that they're sick, you're not going to bring them chicken soup. And hopefully, if you know them well enough to bring them chicken soup, you're going to know whether they're actually vegetarian and don't want chicken soup and would really prefer something vegetarian. So knowing them well enough to know what to bring to them, what kind of help would they appreciate. And we have to know them well enough to be concerned about them. And we have to know them well enough for them to be open to us providing that help, because often that's a step for people too, that it can be hard to accept help from somebody else. So he's really pushing this notion that relationship is important, and that we need to get to know our neighbors. We need to get to know those people around us so that we can care for each other. When we know our neighbors, he talks about the fact that we feel safe and our children feel safer, right? So we feel more comfortable sending our kids across the street to the playground when we know the neighbors that are around us. When we know our neighbors, we can help each other. We can have fun together, right? Have a block party, send the kids to the playground together. And knowing our neighbors, knowing other people in our community strengthens social capital. And social capital is those bonds of reciprocal relationships. Somebody today already talked about mutuality. And this is where that mutuality comes into effect, that sense that we can rely on each other. It's not just me relying on you, but you can also rely on me, that I can offer something as well. So caring for one another helps us to build our sense of belonging, and that sense of belonging is just such an important. It's an important spiritual thing. It's an important community thing. It feeds into our identity. It feeds into our sense of self, our self-worth, all of that stuff. And so, in thinking about the cores and the programs that you're involved in, how do you create those spaces where people can care for each other? So it's not just about them knowing they can rely on you as the pastor or you as a person, as a social worker who's providing the services. How can they rely on each other? And what is it that you're doing in your programs to help them to build those connections, to build that social capital and that sense of belonging? Okay, I'm going to open it up again. Oops, sorry, I'll jump back. Okay, so what are you guys doing? What are the things you're doing in your communities to help people to care for each other?
We have a prayer jar on the counter at the front. Mm-hmm. And people can put things into it. We ask that we try and make it anonymous, because people put things into it, and they could also take stuff out if they wanted to take and pray for someone. Okay. They put the prayer request back in the jar so that somebody else could pray as well.
That's lovely. Other thoughts or examples?
This is still something we're engaging with in conversation with our leadership here, only been here half a year,
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out what they already do really well to care for each other, but we're emphasizing life groups and home groups as the place where this connection takes place.
Mm-hmm.
The things that my husband and I don't lead, that people are leading themselves and for each other, and trying to figure out, use simple things like meal train. So it's an online thing. You can create an event, and then people can sign up online to take meals to a certain person on certain days, and just some tools like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've mastered it yet. I think we're still engaging. What does this?
Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts and ideas?
Sorry, we have Madison.
Yeah.
Madison shares, I'm taking baby steps in building relationships as we're still trying to build programs, but I invite many of my visitors to go for coffee anytime, just to let them know that that we're available for more than an appointment.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it's important that that the people who come to us build good relationships with us as caregivers, as pastors, as social workers, that those relationships are important. And I think Born is also pushing us to kind of figure out what are those things that we can do to help people to rely on each other and build up that sense of being able to have a good, strong relationship with their friends, with their the people that are around them. Okay. I'm going to move us on to the next slide then. So out of all of this then is that sense that together, when we care for one another, when we have fun together, when we share with each other, that together we can work to build a better world. I think we all know that volunteers receive more than they give. My son went on a recent service trip to Guatemala and came back just a changed person. And so I know that that he received more than he gave in terms of the painting that he did or the digging that he did or whatever it was. He was definitely the recipient in that situation, and that was good. I wanted him to experience that. So when we know that volunteers give more than they receive or receive more than they give, there is that sense of collective altruism. And Bourne suggests that collective altruism creates metaphysical bonds between people. So they're a part of something that's greater than themselves. And he suggests that when people work together to help others, that it helps them to feel like they've always known each other. So that sense of connection over time. And we talked about this today already, that sense of mutuality. Doing with and not for builds empowerment and collective efficacy. So we want to be able to use the assets of the people in our communities to empower them and to help them to have that sense of collective efficacy that they can make a difference. And together, then we can have a strong sense of the community where we can work together to make a difference. So I'd like to open it up again and see, do you have any examples of some of those situations where you've got that collective efficacy, where you have that experience of people who are, something that you could do for them, but that when they have done it for themselves or they have done it for somebody else, what kind of effect that has on them? So let's open it up again.
Well, I just think the big one is at Christmas time with the Christmas hampers, Christmas kettles, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You get people that, have maybe applied for a Christmas hamper, and they'll come and help make them up and build them up, and they'll come and volunteer. And I think it just really builds them up, and I think it really makes them feel like they're helping, that we're not doing for them, we're doing it, with them. And, just the people that volunteer at Christmas time, they seem to just really get a lot of enjoyment out of it and a real sense of contributing.
Yeah. And what do you see in them then? So when they have contributed, what do you see as different for them?
I think they have a little bit more pride.
Yeah.
And it's, because for some people it's really humbling to accept help.
Mm-hmm.
And this way they feel it's more like a hand up rather than a hand out, the old cliche thing. And it really seems to just build them up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other thoughts?
One thing that we have coming up, the coldest nights of the year, where we, we'll have teams and it's to raise money and raise awareness. And can't remember how many years we've been doing it now, but a lot of our clients, they now, obviously they want to walk and help, and they actually have, some of them they're so excited about it and want to have their own teams. And just seeing them feel like they're a part of it, and it's great.
That's great. Part of what's rolling through my head right now too is just the thought of justice rather than charity. That when you can work together towards justice, it becomes less about charity and that handout, but working together towards justice means that things can really change, and that's significant and important. Okay. We are actually almost out of time here, so I'm going to just push one more slide here. This is just a little bit of homework that I leave you with, and we've already touched on a lot of this, but I just encourage you to, as you go about your work, to think about opportunities to help community members to share stories with each other, to enjoy one another, to care for one another. And then think about, with these relationships that are built, how can you together work towards a better world? What are those goals and things that you are working on that you can work together to achieve, with you as that catalyst? I'd encourage you to have a peek at Shani Graham's video, Take a Street and Build a Community. She's originally from west coast of BC, I think, but she's been living in Australia, and she has just a phenomenal video about the changes that she and the community members, neighbors around her made in their street, particularly when you think about Bourne's concepts that we talk about today. I'm going to send out a link, or not a link, a sheet that has some resources for you guys, and this will be on there as well. But Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you to finish off, I think. I think you have to unmute yourself, Peter.
I did, and I've unmuted everyone just so. And of course, we had the music from Starbucks. Thank you so much. Had fun, haven't we, Matt? Thank you for putting up with my mute and unmute button. I need to first recognize Colonel Debbie Graves has joined us today, and so, Colonel, would you like to bring greetings from your 7th floor?
Well, hello everybody. It's great to be a part of this group. Love the stories. Need to hear more, because that's one way we can encourage each other. So, yeah, good to be here.
And Colonel Debbie will be bringing our last session, the 4th session. So she'll be joining us as often as she can to sit in, and just so glad you could join us and be a part of this. As we wrap up, I just want to highlight a few more things for you. One is the book that we initially thought we were getting, which was Deepening Community by Paul Bourne. You got the chapters that we needed for this week, and I want to thank Tamarack especially for making those PDFs available to us. I highly recommend this, and would say it would be a great resource for yourself and future growth. The books that did drop into our office, which are Community Conversations, look like this, and we will be shipping those out to you this week. So they will be shipped to your mailing address, your work address. If you do not want them there, please let me know. Send me an email, say no, please send it here. But they'll be going out by the end of the week. You'll have them as soon as we can. We're very excited about this. It kind of fell into our lap, but this book has turned out to be a real blessing, and I think you'll enjoy it. The other thing I'd like to remind you of course, is the coaching. Let me get the little page here. You were all sent an email by Major Gale, and it highlights a number of our core ministry coaches that are available. And so if you have not done so, take a moment to read this and respond to Major Gale by Wednesday. February the 7th this week. I was a coach last year for the evangelism cohort, and I can truly share with you it was a wonderful experience, not only for myself, but for the coachee. We had a personal journey together of discovery that she kind of led and I facilitated, and in the end, it was extremely beneficial for her and her ministry in her core. So please, please, please take advantage of this. This is a kind of a bonus of the cohort. There's other bonuses coming. We won't share them all just yet, but that is one I highly recommend. For next week, next month, I keep saying next week, it's next month, we will encourage you to read the community conversations as well as the PDF we sent you by John McKnight on asset building community development. I found that document very, very helpful in my ministry in Core Ministries in Midland. It actually caused me to do a lot of kind of revolutionary stuff, and I recommend that to you. Also go on the Tamarack website. You'll notice John McKnight is coming to the Kitchener-Waterloo area in April to do a workshop on this. I know for most of you traveling eastbound to Toronto, or in this case, may not be in your budget, but certainly take a look at that. I believe that's it. The only thing I can share is I've sent each of you a personal invite to our brand spanking new Facebook group for this cohort. As we talk about community and we're doing these readings and we're struggling or processing what this means for us as we go through this cohort, and how does this impact our ministry and our core and our family services, it dawned on me that maybe we could create our own community. And using Facebook is a way we can do that. So please look for that email. If sign up, it will be a private group for just this cohort. And the idea is that we can interact with one another. I've taken training through Booth Online, and I can tell you that the format they use for their online courses and that community and that dialogue was very transformational for me. So please look at that and sign up. Take advantage of that. Our instructors will be there, and I will be posting a few thoughts, and I encourage our instructors to do the same, and for you as participants. Let's engage in this material and take it a step deeper, and let's enhance our learning together. I believe that's it for today. I want to thank our professor. Madison's apologizing.
You're welcome.
For the Starbucks noise. And so guess what? I've done much learning through Starbucks. You're not the only one. And I'm a little jealous because, Colonel Debbie gives you a thumbs up. Her specialty is chai latte. So I was pointing you out, Madison, that you were, I threw you under the bus because Colonel Debbie loves a good Starbucks chai latte, but she shared with me she's already had one today. So I don't feel so sorry for her. I haven't had mine.
I haven't had one yet either, but that's my favorite too.
Okay, so we're all in agreement. Madison buys next round. All right. Thank you all. This has been a great day. Please send feedback. We appreciate that. This is a brand new thing for us. So anything you can enhance this, if you had any technical difficulties, let us know. But we just want to bless you now as you go out and minister this week in Jesus' name. Have a great week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.